This message is intended as a reminder that we are not licensed professionals, not psychiatrists or psychologists. If you have a serious problem, please seek professional help. The National Suicide Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255.
There's some damsels in the DM.
Yes, queen.
Tell us what's the vibe. There's some damsels in the DM. Please tell us what's the vibe. DMs, yeah we see them, yeah we read them. DMs, we don't need them, we just leave them.
Please.
Yeah.
It's going down in the DMs. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Damsels in the DMs. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Alejandro.
And hello to our new season. I believe this is season 4 of our podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah, season 4.
And as you may know or may not know, season 4 has gone through a rebrand, and we are kicking off our rebranded series with Sassy Mohen, the director, writer, producer, and editor, my dear friend, and also the creator of How to Hack Birth Control, which we have talked about many times on this podcast.
And many more times we shall, because Sassy is absolutely amazing. Oh my God, the listeners are going to get an earful of inspiration, motivation, and kick-ass energy that we all deserve from her. This guest is oh my God, I'm so glad she's on the podcast.
If you are a new filmmaker and you're looking for inspiration on how to get started, things that you can do or paths that you can follow, Sassy is definitely somebody that you should look to for inspiration. She offers amazing advice, whether you're taking the film school path, whether you're not taking the film school path, and just to get your career going and kick it into gear.
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
All right. Well, today we are here with Sassy Mohen, who I think I've actually talked about on the podcast before, because Sassy cast me in her film, How to Hack Birth Control, which has been making waves through the festival circuit. I know Alejandro has a lot of questions that he wants to ask about it. So I think I'm going to turn it over to him. But Alejandro, have you seen it yet? Have I showed it to you or no?
You haven't shown it to me, but I'm obsessed with how it's described as each memorable contraceptive milestone.
Yeah.
A new riotous discovery. I'm obsessed with that description. Oh my God.
Thank you. That's a really nice compliment. I appreciate that. You know, because you go through like adjectives and stuff, trying to find exactly the right word that fits what you want to say, but is also unique. So thank you. That's really nice to hear.
Absolutely. And can you share with us, how this project started and how it feels to be where it's at now with all the accolades that it's been getting so far?
Yeah. Well, first of all, just side note, Lauren is amazing in it and also is on the poster. And I always joke with her. I was like, did you ever envision your crotch would be like on a film poster? And she said no. So, it's a new thing for her. But that aside, I direct social media commercials for a living, write, direct, produce, and edit them. And when I started getting into that in 2019, my brain's always kind of like looking for new ideas. And a lot of those commercials involve hacks. And while I do love all of my freelance jobs, they are just jobs and they are quite limiting in terms of your creative output. And some of them are very silly. And so I started thinking, what if I use the techniques that I do in these commercials, but actually use them in my films in a way to captivate audiences? And the title came to me first, How to Hack Birth Control. And so, that was in 2019. And then the pandemic happened and, I didn't think I'd be able to do it. I started writing it. And what also happened right before the pandemic is one of my close friends who's about 10 years younger than me ended up having an abortion, which she told me about after the fact. And what happened, the long story short of it is that she went off her birth control and she was in a really terrible abusive relationship. And she didn't know she had other birth control options that she could actually afford. And then she came over to me and told me, what happened. She ended up getting pregnant, having an abortion. And I said to her, I was like, you could just go to Planned Parenthood and get birth control for free. They have income-based payments. And she was like, are you fucking kidding me? Because she had just gone through this crazy ordeal. And I started realizing just how many women don't know the options that are out there, because while it is incredibly difficult to get birth control in America, it's also not quite as difficult as you might think it is if you know the questions to ask and how to follow up with people and what to even look for in the first place. And so what I kind of did is, like I said, combine the social media techniques with my desire to help inform women about their options, because I personally feel like if women, we have control over our bodies, we have control over our lives, and we can do anything. So it's really just, it's about women's empowerment is the main sort of overall message of it. And while it does educate on birth control, it's really just telling people, it's okay to be yourself, and it's okay to pursue whatever type of sex or dating life you're into. If you're not into any of it, if you're into some of it, it doesn't matter. Women, we have so much judgment on us on a daily basis about how we dress, how we talk, all of those things. And it became really important to me as I became more solid in my career to actually have a female driven film, because I've been doing this, for 15 years. And especially when I was starting, I got so much stuff from producers being like, well, this movie's about a woman, so no one's going to watch it, or you need to rewrite this or that. And or the woman character is too crazy, or, you know what I mean? Just things that men wouldn't hear. And I finally was just like, forget all that. I'm just going to make the movie that I want to make with the female characters I want to create. And it's done incredibly well. And I think that's sort of like a testament, just letting go of whatever the film society puts on you as the type of movie you're supposed to make. And it's been really interesting with the reactions of it. It's gotten incredibly great reviews, and people love it. And I'm so thrilled every time, like, women will come up to me afterwards, and men too, just being like, I had no idea that this thing was going on. And it's funny, it's been in so many festivals that I've made friends there, and sometimes our films will play in the same blocks or whatever. And a few of my male friends, I always joke with them, I was like, you're the most educated men on birth control now, because you've seen this like 10 times at the festivals that we go to together. And it's just been great. And I'm so happy, like, we're in more festivals next year, and we're going to be working on selling it. And there's just, kind of limitless opportunities for it, especially because of how it was made. It could fit on a small screen on your phone, or it could go on a big screen. It's got the capability of doing both those things.
That's amazing. So you mentioned 15 years you've been doing this. So
Yeah.
at what point did you recognize that advocacy and filmmaking were kind of your
could be
fire, or
like bread and butter, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't really come all together at first. At first I made my first feature film in 2006 and 2007 during my junior and senior year at film school at Chapman. And at that point, it was just fighting to get anything done, fighting to get anyone to take me seriously. The amount of times that people told me that I couldn't do something or I shouldn't do something was like, I don't even know how many, you can't count them. And then as I sort of got more into it, and I kept getting rejections in the industry, but then on the other hand, working with great people who believed in me and believed in the films I was making. And I was like, well, I've been pursuing this, since I was like a kid, and these people tell me I'm good, so I must be good, even if people aren't buying what I'm selling, and it kind of started clicking together really, I think in 2012, where I made this web series that I starred in that's not very good, but I did make it and it exists. And it taught me so much about being on the other side of the camera. It was like phenomenal for me as a director. And that's when I started editing my stuff. And that's when I really started realizing, it's sort of silly to say after doing it for years before that, but like the power that you have in your voice to be able to persuade people to do things. And I'd reached a point where I didn't have to like persuade people around me anymore. They're like, no, we're on board. We will do whatever, because your films are good. And so I just started writing stronger and stronger female characters. And I think that a lot of it also changed with the Me Too movement, where women were finally taken seriously, because it's hard now. And it was really hard then. When I tell people I'm a director, and I would get the like, oh, that's cute. That's nice. Yeah. And when I made like 2 feature films by the time I was 25 years old, and one of them was sold and got distribution and made its money back. And that got me my first job at a production company as a receptionist, because the owners of the company thought it'd be cute if the receptionist also made movies. So they could tell the big clients like, oh, look at how much we love filmmaking. Even our receptionist makes movies. It was really insane the amount of times I got passed over. And I think around the Me Too movement, 2016, Hillary losing, all of those things where I just reached a breaking point of realizing that I'm not going to make films because in a way that I think the industry wants them. I'm going to make my movies. And if they don't like them, that's their problem. And I'm not saying that I throw, filmmaking conventions away. I don't, but it's not like I'm making movies that have certain characters that I know would play well. I'm just making the movies that I want to make and saying the things that I want to say. And I've always, exclusively written female leads in my films, and they've just gotten stronger as I've gotten better as a writer. And it really just kind of all sort of came together in 2016, 2017. And also another thing is that people used to really be like shy on touching on politics in films, especially on like indie films. They were trying to reach as broad an audience as possible. And with the 2016 election, that kind of got ripped off, and I grew up in DC and my parents both work in the news, and I grew up around politics, and it's like second nature to me. And so with all those kind of events kind of culminating together, and with my own personal life, turning 30, having gone through so many things and so many jobs and learning, I just sort of embraced it. And then like not coincidentally, the films did better, because I wasn't so in my head about, oh, should I say this? Should I not say that? I was like, I'm just going to say it, and hopefully people like it, and they do. And I just think that I wish that I had been nurtured a little bit more when I was younger, but maybe that's also part of the journey, to get to a certain place. But I really just love to encourage other women filmmakers or minority filmmakers. Like, no offense to white men, I'm marrying one in October. I love him dearly, but like, like straight white men have had the microphone, since movies started in the 1880s, and it's their stories over and over. And in film school, I don't even know if we watched a movie about a woman. We're watching like Blade Runner and Battleship Potemkin and Ben-Hur and, all these movies about white men and their white man journey that they go through, that I just think it's really important now to embrace the female voice and to be unapologetic for it. And even still today, I run into things all the time about it. I was talking to an acquaintance friend of mine a few months ago who was doing quite well in the industry, and just getting his thoughts on trying to get a different agent. And he was like, it seems like birth control is really good, because he hadn't watched it. And he was like, but you should really make a movie that people would be surprised a woman did it. Like, what if you made
What?
Yeah. And like, that was what I thought. I was like, so I'm assuming that like Quentin Tarantino also gets that statement, right?
Yeah.
Like, or like, Ava DuVernay, like to her about like telling a different ethnicity story. Like, that's so ridiculous. But like, for whatever reason, men feel like that's okay to tell women and minority filmmakers. And I just think that the more of us that like kind of stand strong and are just unapologetic about the work that we put out, the better. And that's what I try and do with all of my stories. And I didn't intend to in the beginning, but I always have. It was just a matter of finding my voice, really, that took, about 8 or 9 years to figure it out, how I wanted to say what I wanted to say,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I want to go back to the point, because I thought it was really cool that you brought that up about being nurtured as a filmmaker from a young age, because as we're going through this rebrand of our podcast, we really want to look at the journeys of creators and how they get to the point that they are. Sure. And what are some of the challenges you experience, because we really want to point a light at how people can emulate steps, what they can take away, putting more tools in the toolbox to get people where they want to be. So I'm curious what ways you think we could nurture filmmakers better, specifically female filmmakers and minority filmmakers, and what tools do you think they could be provided at an earlier age to get to the point that you want to be earlier on?
I mean, that's a really good question and a really complex one. I'm coming with my perspective of being born in the late 80s and getting into this in the 90s and going to college, right as social media was becoming a thing. And I don't know what it would be like now, say for a 17-year-old in film school, but I do know that like I took one of my friend's cousins on some tours of film schools here in 2016. And, at Chapman, I'm still friendly with some of the professors, and he let us sit in on a 400 level directing class. And before we walked in, I said to her, I don't know what it's like now, but when I went into film school, these 400 level classes were about 10 to 12 people, all men except 2 women, one misunderstood artsy chick and one lesbian or soon to be lesbian. And we walked in, and that was quite literally the dynamic in front of us. And she turned to me and laughed. I mean, she was like, 17 years old at the time, just looking at schools. And that was kind of remarkable to me, because that was 10 years or 9 years after I had finished at Chapman, and so little had changed. And I think that there's like broad answers to that, which is just allowing women the ability to tell stories. When I started TV production classes in elementary school, it would be me and all guys and maybe another girl or two. And I just kind of assumed that's how it was, right? Because it's like, how would you think differently if you've never experienced a different thing? And where some of my friends maybe pursued other careers, there would be more women in the room. And so I just grew up being used to that and being comfortable talking to men in a way where we're treating each other equally or expecting it. A lot of women aren't really taught how to do that, how to stand up for yourself, because it's so easy to be belittled, by other people and other people who are threatened by you. And they try and use different tactics that society places on women all the time about, like, I don't know, the way they look, or even if it's just like, do you want a family? You know what I mean? Like, you have to have a career or family, which is total nonsense, which is completely inaccurate, and it's just, there's the broader context of really listening to younger girls in high school and elementary school and hearing what they want to do. I was really fortunate that, like I said, my parents both work in the news, and my mom's retired now, and I'm an only child, and we were pretty broke my entire life, but they never said no. When I told them I wanted to make movies when I was like 8 years old, they said, okay, we'll sign you up for this. And they showed up for the plays I directed in high school, and really just like, they took me to tour in film school. My dad kind of begged me once to go in state, to like BCU or UVA or something. I was like, no, sorry, I'm private school it is. So, good thing my grades are okay. So, it's that type of encouragement that parents need to give their kids. And also just like, I noticed it too. The short film I did before birth control called Fear Actually, that I started putting in festivals in 2020 during the pandemic. And I first started out by trying to get reviews, like paid reviews. And I would get some like really snarky emails in response to me. People very eager to criticize the work, which is, I am more than okay with taking constructive criticism. However, I did think it was weird to pay for a review of something, which I also understand. But then outside of the review, the response in the email, in addition to the review, is criticizing different elements of the film. And one that I thought was like really kind of funny was they talked about the pacing of the last scene. The last scene, we literally did beat by beat to match the Love Actually card holding thing. Literally, I took that scene and put it on the timeline, put the other edit, and like shot by shot, it is exactly like that scene with the music, with all of it. And that's a beloved scene. And the person was like, oh, it's too slow, like, like criticizing it. And I was just like, well, take it up with the director of Love Actually and everyone who loves that scene. Because, and then what I started doing was having Vince, my fiance, submit it to these things. And he got no snarky emails back. He got great work. The reviews were better. And even though my name was still the writer, director, producer, editor of it, he got way more easier access. And I even noticed that with like job postings that I'll do on Facebook, looking for this crew person or this job or whatever, Vince always gets at least double the responses that I do in those communities, and except for, of course, the like female filmmaker communities, because it's just women posting in there, but on the other crew call sites, and it's just, I don't even know how you combat that, right? Because it's about the stigma. I think about this brilliant PBS documentary called Picture a Scientist, and it's about like sexism in the science community. And in it, they talk about this experiment where they made 2 identical resumes, and one said Jane, last name, the other one said John, last name, and they sent it out to different distinguished professors in colleges and asking what they thought of them and if they would hire this person, like just as a thing, like, oh, I just got this resume, what do you think? And the guy got like super qualified, send me his info, like, you know what I mean? On the women got like not ready, not qualified, you know, and the exact same credentials. And so I don't even know how you begin to change that perspective, because you're already operating at a loss, you know, so it's like twice as hard. So it's just like, as a whole, we need to take away this bias that we have towards women and minority filmmakers about, for whatever reason, that our stories aren't good enough or that we're not worth taking a chance on or something like that, you know? I mean, that doesn't really answer your question, but that's kind of my observations I've encountered.
Well, speaking of observations, I think what's wildly infuriating and at the same time somewhat motivating, well, really motivating, is what you were describing as far as like getting these snarky emails or getting a response that was different from Vince. It reminds me of how the access to publishing among writers, like during like George Eliot days, you know, where she couldn't even publish under a woman's name. She had to
Right.
use a pseudonym with a masculine tone to just
Right.
to be able to publish.
Yeah.
And you know, Middlemarch, that's, I remember reading that in college, you know,
Right.
that to have her work still part of, you know, English literature curriculum, um, but still under the guise of that pseudonym that she was required to operate within. It's
Totally.
flabbergasting to, is that even a word? I don't even know. But to see and hear that you're experiencing the same thing, and that was
Yeah.
days ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, it's crazy. And even when I first started, like when I went to Chapman and I moved there from Arlington, Virginia, I like my friends all called me Sassy, and my birth name is Sarah. I never liked that name. I tried to change my name multiple times growing up, like literally from as soon as I could start talking, I would start just giving myself different names. And so when I went to Chapman, you know, I changed my name like officially. It's just like, this is just it. This is my identity, who I am. And it's great. And I love that. But even with the name Sassy, the amount of like, you should change that for resumes, or you should do this or that. And for a while out of college, like my movies, you'll see it's S. Mohen because of what you're talking about, because I was getting feedback from people saying that my name was hindering me. And what's funny is that as soon as I stopped doing that, I would get jobs literally because my name was Sassy, because people would see my resume and see how composed it was, and, you know, look at my site. And it's like, this, one of my favorites was, I was doing like PR and branding for this company, Mark Friedland. He does all the like Oscar invitations, and he does every calligraphy graphic design for Hollywood, like the big stuff. And he would just be like, Sassy, like call me super loud. And I would like come down the hall. And I'm like, he totally hired me because my name was Sassy. And that's great, because the job was super fun, you know? And so it's like, you know, it gets really hard because everyone has an opinion, and then you start doubting yourself, you know. But then it's reached a point, like when, I don't know when that was, like around 2012, where again, I was just like, fuck it. Like, this is just who I am, you know? And if people don't like that, then they don't have to hire me. And I don't want to work with them to begin with if they're so uncomfortable about my identity. You know, it's just, it's who I am, and it's how I call myself in my head, and how I want to be called. And, you know, and if people can't get down with that, then that's their problem. And I don't really want to work with them, you know?
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the point that you said that it took you about 8 or 9 years to understand your voice and hone your voice.
Mhm.
And I'm curious if there was a particular challenge along the way that made you decide to say, fuck it, I'm going to start telling the stories that I want to tell, or, you know, a general accumulation of challenges that you went through. And I know you touched on this a little bit, but I think it would be really interesting for our listeners to hear a moment where you kind of hit a breaking point and decided that you were going to take your career into your own hands.
I mean, it's interesting because I definitely was an accumulation of challenges. I was like blessed or fortunate to figure out what I wanted to do at a super young age, and that has never faltered. You know, so anything that people are like, you can't do this or whatever, in my head, I'm just like, that's wrong. You're just wrong. This is what I'm meant to do. You know, this is what makes me happy, and I'm good at it. And you're still young. And I honestly, my biggest personal challenge outside of the world mostly working against me or women filmmakers in general is just my own mental health. And Lauren, you and I have talked about this, how important it is to really find your own happiness, especially as an artist. I love Hannah Gadsby has this sketch where she's talking about Van Gogh and how people are like, oh, artists have to be tortured. And then she's like, that's bullshit. Like, you don't have to be tortured to be an artist. And it was even funny too, that you're like talking about finding my voice, is that as my life started coming together, as I started working out things of my past and really just never looking behind me, whereas so much of my early 20s was just, I felt like apologizing for missteps that I kept doing personally, that I was talking to my therapist and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to write. Like, all my old scripts were me being mad at someone and just like working it out on a page, you know, and like obviously turning an experience into a completely fictionalized, especially later as I got more into it, like not even connected, like you wouldn't know, but just taking some sort of anger and using it as fuel to write whatever. And she like, I still remember she was like, you'll figure it out. And the next thing I wrote was birth control. So it's like,
Oh, wow.
you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
like, it just kind of comes out like, and that was really exciting for me because I was worried that I was like, well, I'm not like depressed anymore. I get, you know, what stories am I going to tell about how happy I am? No one wants to go to a movie and watch someone be happy for 90 minutes, you know? So it now, and now I'm writing this feature that I'm really excited about. That is a drama, that there's plenty of tumultuous, angsty, angry stuff in it. And it's like better than any of the other stuff because I'm disconnected from it. It's not like my experience. There are emotions that I know and have felt, but it's not like directly pulled from any event or anything like that. And so I think it's really just a culmination of things, of like never giving up, first of all, trying everything, and then working on yourself. Because that, I always had this idea too, as I was going through this, of just like, if I can work out whatever's going on here, then I'm going to succeed twice as fast. And it was completely accurate. As soon as like, you know, you get your mental health in line, I was just like, job, you know, things just start happening. People start reaching out to you. People start, because they understand that you're reliable and that you're trustworthy and that you're good at what you do. And so that's why also I think women, it's easier to get painted a certain way. Like, you know, if you cry or overreact or something like that, you know, I don't know if I've ever cried on set, but I probably have in the closet, especially like when I was younger, you know what I mean? But like, I was assistant directing my friend's film over the weekend, and it's her first time directing, but she's a brilliant writer. And so she crowdfunded it and got about, I think like $18,000 for this movie, and had a phenomenal crew and knew what she was doing, even though it was her first time. But there's this one point in it where it was a horror film, and there was, you know, all these complicated shots, and she was trying to set up this prop in a certain way. And all the crew, all men, started suggesting different things. And like, we were, you know, I'm assistant director. I was like, we got to go. And she just said, no one is listening to me. We need to do it this way. And then everyone did it. And it was one of those things where if it were me, I wouldn't have said it like that. And I would have probably just made, you know, because when you become confident at a certain point, you're just like, if you're not listening, like, fuck you. Hey, you know, like, move this. But it was really telling for me. And it reminded me a lot of when I was younger and directing, about how I truly felt like people weren't listening to me and were like, oh, she wants to do it this way, but it's probably better like that. And it's like, maybe they're right. But as a director, I need to learn that. And I need to learn why that's better, or why my idea is better, so that the next time I can make a better judgment call, you know? So it's really just, there wasn't ever truly an epiphany moment, but it was one of those things that like I did this pilot Weedland in 2016. And that's the first story that I truly feel like, and some of my friends have had said too, is like, this is where your writing is like good, like great. And who you are now, like, this is where your voice has really shown through. And I look at my earlier stuff and it's there. It's just trying to figure out how to come out correctly, you know? And so it's just really never giving up and working on yourself and just trying to find the confidence, you know, to say what she said, no one's listening to me. You know, a lot of people just wouldn't even say that, and they would just do whatever someone else was saying, or keep it up and like keep it inside and it comes out later or something like that. You know, it's just figuring out how to say no one's listening to me, and then what you do with that statement after that, you know?
Oh, I cannot wait until your material and your insights are part of curriculum of universities across the country and the
Thank you
world.
so much.
No, seriously, I love and admire the tone of perseverance and trust within yourself. I
Yeah,
think that is such a powerful mode to operate within in order
totally.
to not only like get the best out of yourself, but at least to align yourself with other people who might be like-minded, who are willing to give of themselves the work that
Yeah,
you're
no,
doing.
absolutely. And it's like the more you find your own voice, you start attracting those exactly like you said, who have also found their own voice. And now I've gotten really good, I feel like, of being able to understand right away when beginning to work with a person how well we're going to get along. And like if I want to work with them again, if I want to work with them in the first place, you just kind of pick up on little subtle cues, which again, you're able to do if you're not dealing with stuff in here. As soon as you remove the fog of your own crap and just have a clear head, it's amazing the things that you'll notice around you, especially with filmmaking.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the present tense, there's no better way to exist than like the here and the now.
Yeah.
But outside of the here and the now, do you have any helpful morning routines that help you?
Or if it's not necessarily a morning routine, because I know not everybody is a morning person. If you
That is
have like
true.
healthy habits that you feel like you stick by and have contributed to making you who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I try and work out at least 5 days a week, in the morning. I have my own little workout. I love it. It's
I
called
saw her do this.
yeah. Oh
Sassy and
yeah, at
I
the
had
Bentonville.
I know this is actually a very funny experience for me because it's a lot of worlds colliding being on my podcast, but I'm usually seeing Sassy to do press for how to hack birth control. So I'm like, she's talking about how to hack birth control. I'm like, which projects am I promoting right now? Anyway, it's actually very interesting to me. But Sassy and I were at the Bentonville Film Festival and we actually stayed in a hotel room together for like 5 days or something.
Yeah, with Heather, the
Yeah.
woman I was assistant directing your film over the weekend. Yeah.
Which I
Cool.
think also is a good test of can we work together for a long time?
Totally.
If you
Yeah.
can stay in a hotel room with somebody and not hate them afterwards, then I think
Yeah.
that you can have a long lasting working relationship.
Definitely. But yeah, I was like with Lauren, we would be up late and I was like, I got to get up early. I have to work out, like, because it just clears my head. And this little workout, it's not even little, it's the Insanity workout. It's in the P90X family. And it's just a bunch of videos that they have scheduled out for a 2-month period that I don't know if I've even ever done it like the 2 months as it's been allotted, but the videos are great because it's like, they're 45 minutes to an hour and a half. You know exactly how long it's going to take. You know exactly what you're going to work out. And they're very challenging. And so it's not like something that you tap out on, over time. And they don't require any equipment. And that's just something that I found that works for myself, right?
Mhm.
Other people have their tons of other stuff. I work from home. And when it's not, like comes time to working out, I want like hit it or quit it. You know what I mean? I want to get up, I want to work out, and then I want to get into it. And that's just what works for me. I also spend every morning, if I can, watching the PBS NewsHour. I don't know if that's a morning care routine, but it helps me. Judy Woodruff's amazing, even though she's retiring, but the
All
new
right,
anchors
Judy.
are great. Yeah, I mean, she deserves it. She's like 72. That woman hustles. So, but yeah, I mean, it's that type of stuff, and just making sure, oh, this is one, making sure to cut off my work time. Like that took a while because I would just go right and work until 10 and then be exhausted the next day. That's something I worked with, like with my therapist about being like, you have to stop working at 8 o'clock. You just the work isn't as good after, and you're not going to get up like as early the next day. And so now every day at 8 o'clock, I stop myself and I have fun. I watch shows, I hang out with Vince, we foster cats, I hang out with cats, whatever, because I realize that in order to be creative and be productive, you have to make time for yourself and take time off, as disgusting as that idea sounds to me, because if it were up to me, I would work 24 hours a day forever. But
And speaking of Vince, because our roots are as a dating podcast, I want to talk
sure.
about how you find balance, which you touched on just now, between your career, your relationship, your friendships, your self-care. Because I'm like you, I'm a bit of a workaholic.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I feel like I can start to resent like self-care time. And even when I'm trying to be in my self-care time, my mind will be going crazy thinking
Right.
about work. So what are some helpful strategies that you use to combat that? Because I think a lot of us suffer from this workaholism.
Yeah, and I mean, it's true, especially today with like instant gratification on everything. I mean, for me, I will schedule out hangout times like weeks in advance. Like, I'm not kidding. I'm hanging out with one of my friends this weekend on the 17th. We planned this at the end of November because I was like, okay, this is a day that I know I can like dedicate this amount of time to. And I thought I'd be sleeping in the next day, but we're going to watch the World Cup at 7 a.m. But that's fine. But that's also like something, planning well in advance, very well in advance. And Vince is really amazing. I know one of the questions that you sent was something along the lines of like, talk about a relationship that made you better. And I was thinking, I was like, well, it's really cliche, but Vince, I was single for so long and dated plenty of terrible people. Like, I think as a majority, like most of them are just terrible. And like so many of them hated that I pursued directing. It was either I didn't pay enough attention to them and I didn't care enough about them, or I was being unrealistic and I need to get a real job, or they were threatened by it. I had like one guy say to me, like, well, you're making me feel bad about myself because I don't know what I want to do. Like, as if that's
Oh
my problem.
my.
You know what I mean? And he was in his
Wow.
30s too, which is ridiculous.
Ugh.
So it's just, when I found Vince, we met on Bumble, and it like was instant. It was this thing. It was like undeniable. And I was at this point where I was incredibly straightforward with people, and he didn't have a lot of dating experience. And so if he did something I didn't like, I'd be like, hey, you didn't call me like during this time. And then he'd be like, oh my, like I was driving. My job is I drive cars at the time, and he's like, I drive usually from 6 a.m. to noon, and so I can't text people. And instead of me just being like, oh, why didn't you text me, we hung out last night and he said he was going to text me, and just sitting on it forever, I was just like, yo, you didn't text me, like that's not cool, or whatever. He's like, and it's like, okay, that problem is not even a problem because we've communicated it. And I think like he and I communicate everything to each other, of just even when the day starts, of being like, I'm going to be working on this for this time, what are you doing? And like making sure that we schedule out our time together. Like, we'll schedule date nights, like literally having to schedule them. And some people are like, well, you live together, like don't you hang out? It's like, no, we work, or he plays video games, or I'm out here. So it's just really just communication, I feel like, is the answer to your question, with your friends too, because even my best friends that I've known since I was 5, they're not in the industry. They all live on the East Coast and do various jobs that have absolutely no Venn diagram, like correlation at all. And like, as I started getting busier a few years ago, we still talk on the phone because that's how we started being friends when we were young. And, one of them would randomly call me and I'd just be like, I can't do random phone calls anymore. It's just like, that's just the way my life is. And I have to schedule time out, because you talk on the phone with their friend, it takes a while to get back into work. Who wants to get back into work after you've been like talking to your friend for a while? And so it's like, one of my friends, Jane, she even said, she was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's a really good point. I would love to talk to you on Friday at 7, and so it's just that type of communication and understanding. And out of respect for them, I will also text them before I call, even though they're not quite as busy as I am.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because especially being in film school right now, I've really realized that the film industry has such a burnout culture. And
Totally.
I knew this before, but like being in school at Columbia, there's like a huge culture around helping everybody on their projects that you're doing. And our class, and I think it's fine that I say this, literally got yelled at as being the worst class in 20 years at turning in assignments on time and showing up on time to class. But it's because we're all so dedicated to helping each other on our projects. And I think that like it's hard because our semester is literally described as being like boot camp. And
Totally.
when I think about what I was doing before going to school, I think it was also like boot camp. And I think that that's just the culture that the film industry creates. And it's weird because I've talked about this with people before. It's like, you're not saving lives. We're not doctors. But for some reason, like there's this culture around, like, you know, the old saying, like, do you want it done well or do you want it on Tuesday? But that's what it is.
That's you just described like all of my jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's so accurate because, like, I think that some of it, because films aren't maybe quite as cut and dry as other occupations in terms of like, get me this report, and that things happen, footage gets lost, footage doesn't look good, the sound card is weird, you know what I mean? Unpredictable things happen, and payouts generally don't come until something's done. And I think that the people on top are mostly understandably so very eager to get their money, and so that's probably where that comes from. But you're absolutely correct. There are, so many deadlines that are insane. And for me now, I feel fortunate that I've reached the point where I can put a foot down and just be like, no, I can't do that. And if you don't like that, then you need to find someone else to do this job, which I've done a lot recently because people want to take advantage of that. It's like, well, if you want it done that quickly, that's fine, but you have to pay me a rush rate because that's what you're asking me to do. And that wasn't what we agreed upon. And so it's just a matter of like being confident enough, but also having the goods to back up that statement. Because like 5 years ago, I would have like tripped over myself to like be overextended and underpaid. You know what I mean? So it's not something that you can like walk out of film school and be like, I demand everything how I want it. But like, if you prove that you know what you're doing and can actually make people money and deliver a product, then you have more ground to stand on. And, but it does suck that the culture is incredibly instant, that you want everything now. What about you, Alejandro? Did you have any thoughts on that? I know Lauren and I have been monopolizing the conversation.
No. No, it's been amazing to hear you both share your experiences. I haven't gone to film school, so I wish I had. I did have friends that were in the Screen Arts and Culture program at the University of Michigan.
Okay, cool.
So through them, I was able to learn about the many facets of filmmaking. But I always sit in awe listening to stories of experiences similar to what you're sharing, because like I said earlier, I just admire so much of the perseverance and the trust in oneself that you both demonstrated.
Yeah. And I mean, also, if you don't go to film school, that doesn't mean any, you know what I mean? Like the best experience I had at film school that got me my job was that feature film that I did on my own. It was an independent study credit, and it took 2 years, but that was the best learning experience. Then the flip of that is I probably wouldn't have been able to make that had I not gone to Chapman and not had the resources that I had to fight them on to give me. And that's a whole other story. But, film school works for some people, but it also, like, if you don't get in, just make a movie and you'll probably have the same experience without the debt following you around afterwards.
And I think I could relate it to what you were sharing about taking time to find my voice. I think
Totally.
during undergrad, one of my favorite things was finding the screenplay library that my friends had access to. And even though I didn't have a professor that taught me the ins and outs of screenwriting, I just loved being able to like dig my nose into each screenplay and just have fun with that, and
For
like
sure.
learning from those examples of great writing.
Yeah.
That was kind of the pace that I was at that time. I was still finding my voice as a writer, and it took the amount of time that I needed to in order to feel the confidence that was necessary. And luckily, I'm so grateful to Lauren for helping me garner that confidence and just move forward. But
Lauren's great.
I mean, I'm sure our listeners are dying to know, how can we keep up with.
Oh, well, wait. We got to get to the DM of the week.
Oh, yeah.
We got to get to she talked about her relationship, but we didn't get the funniest or the most inspirational DM that you've ever received, Sassy. And the reason that I'm really being a stickler for this is because if you've seen How to Hack Birth Control, then you know that Sassy really has an eye for the douchebaggery that has gone on in the last few years. So I'm sure that there has to be a good DM that you've received over the years that that's memorable.
I mean, I was actually thinking about this when you asked this question, and I think I block out a lot of the terrible ones. I still get weird ones now, like, people, saying sexy stuff to me, and I'm like, what are you doing? My Instagram is like my film posters and pictures and shit, and like pictures of Vince and I. Like, what about that means that I'm up for like grabs, as a person?
It's my crotch and the chastity belt.
Yeah,
Sassy.
I guess it must be.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like people are weird, like they come at you from everywhere with the weirdest stuff. And I mean, it's kind of it. I love that Instagram now has a thing where it's like the request and then there's like the sub, like there's so many layers, so you don't even have to get the crazy stuff anymore. And I know it's kind of like a lackluster answer because I don't have a specific experience. I have plenty from when I was single, and the idiot lines I would get on like Tinder, but like, Sassy, are you sassy? Oh my God, Sassy. Is that like your Friday night name or something like that? And there was another thing too, when I would get those types of comments and I'd be like, what about my profile makes you think that I'm like that? My picture would be like me, friends, me on set, like not even in any way, shape, or form. And so, but I have found one thing very interesting that came from when I was dating, that people who I met or when I was dating, guys who didn't mention my name in the first conversations or like first date, generally it worked out with. Anyone who made a thing about my name, it never works professionally, as a friend. Even if it's like you meet someone, you're like, hey, I'm Sassy. You're like, oh, okay. It's like, no, that wasn't like a invitation. That was just like, a statement. And I get that it's an adjective and stuff, but there are plenty of weird names. I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow named her kid Apple. You know what I mean? Like, what is a name anymore anyway? We've reached a point where it's just like, get over it.
Well, now I think is the perfect time to close it out. Sassy, thank you so much for coming on. Please tell everybody where they can follow you, where they can follow the journey of how to hack birth control and everything you have coming up.
Yes. So my Instagram is at Sassy Mohen. That's SassymOhen. And my Facebook is Sassy Mohen Films. Twitter doesn't exist anymore, so I'm not there anymore. And my website is sassymohen.com. And if you want to keep up with how to hack birth control, you can go to birthcontrolhacks.com. And we have a mailing list. We've got all this info. We've got pictures of Lauren all over the place. What more do you need?
Well, thank you again, Sassy. It's been a pleasure getting to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is great. And I love the questions you guys ask, and the DM thing is amazing.
This is an absolute treat. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. As usual, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast listening platform.
And don't forget to continue sending us your DMs, since we are going through this rebranding. We don't need no long letters. We just need a fun little sentence or two of a DM. Keep it short. Keep it cute.
If you don't want to keep it cute, if you got a longer question, that's fine too. But as we said, we are no longer accepting messages on other platforms. We are just accepting DMs in our roots as damsels in the DMs.
That's it. We'll be waiting. And until next time,
it's going down in the DMs. Bye.
DMs, we don't need them, we just leave them.
Please.
Yeah.
It's going down in the DMs. Bye.